Now for our next comparison. The stories. Wow. You talk about difference in stories when it comes to the first-time book series and the big chapter book series. Excuse me, I just killed a spider in my face. I just killed it. Sorry about that, I didn't mean for you to see that. But a spider came around calling down, and quite honestly, I don't like spiders. But anyway, as I was saying, the difference in stories. You talk about a huge difference in comparing some of the stories to the PBS series and the first-time book series. The big chapter book series is probably the major area. You see, in these stories, they deal with a lot of other things besides what you read in the first-time book series. Let me give you a prime example. Now, if I can get to it, because like I said, I have a lot. Here. Here are some of them. Now, true, they do deal with something like this, but this is more like the fact of losing a friend. In other words, losing a pet. More specifically, what happens here is Sister Bear's pet goldfish has died. And her parents try their best to make sure she doesn't know but what they don't know is she figures it out. But this is one of the things they deal with, situations like this. Now they also deal with things like the bad influence. And this introduces a character named Miranda. Basically, they're trying to show off in front of each other. They deal with stories like this, but it's not just these kind of stories. But we find out in this kind of a story that it's not the new friend's fault or sisters, it's both. And they make up for it in this story. But it's not just this story. You see, the major difference between the big chapter book series and this, well, here's a classic, Too Much TV. Who can forget this one? Huh? Do you see this being dealt with in the big chapter book series, Too Much TV? No. These are the kind of stories, compared to what you read in the big chapter book series, are only brought into these. And when it comes to the PBS series, these are most of the stories that are adapted into the cartoon. These stories. If the PBS series was still running, there's no doubt these stories as well would be adapted. But you never see a lot of big chapter book series stories being adapted, except for a few, like Female Fullback and Nerdy Nephew, but they're loosely adapted. That's the difference between the stories. These are adapted almost right to the T. Right to a T. I mean, this book, what year was this made? Let me see, I'm trying to see what year. 1984. 1984, 19 years later, it's adapted into a story right to the T. What else? Well, let's see. This one, too, is directly almost adapted right to a T. Not one thing is missed out of it. Right to a T. This was made basically 13 years before the PBS series came out. Right to a T, the the episode does it. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, everything you've ever known is there. I mean, right to a T, with a few exceptions. But right to a T. Why am I saying this? Well, like I said, when it comes to the big chapter book series, things are a lot more different. I mean, a lot more different. I mentioned the female fullback. Did I not? Yes, I did. I did mention it. Now, here's another difference in comparison. The first-time book series actually deals with other things. Take a look at this. I mentioned this in one of the videos before, but take a look. They deal with situations you didn't think of. Christian books, living life, in first-time book series. I mean, take a look at this. Unbelievable. But you know, these aren't the first books that have dealt with this kind of scenario, kind of situation. It's not the first time. Take a look. That's right. But like I said, the big chapter book series dealt with a lot. And like I said, there were some stories that were loosely adapted. Like in this verse, like in here, in the big chapter book series of the female fullback, the character that I mentioned earlier, Bertha Boone, wants to try out for the football team. But the coach doesn't want a female on his team until he sees what she can do. Now, how is this loosely adapted on the PBS series, you might ask? Well, it's loosely adapted because the character is replaced by a character named Betsy. But instead of wanting to be on the team, she's actually persuaded. We have brother, cousin Fred, and Tutah persuading her to join them to help them win the game. But instead she comes up with a compromise. She'll help them train and improve on what they can't do if she helps them in exchange. If they help her in exchange. So what happens is that Betsy gets Betsy practices track with brother excuse me, practices track with Betsy. Cousin Fred practices basketball, and Tutah ends up in ballet. And through all of these practices with her, they find out that it's actually helped them improve. Ooh, on the day of the big game, because when they try to find Betsy, wondering why she's not in uniform, she says, "I'm not playing. What I've done is actually help you improve." And it's proven. So in other words, that's how loosely adapted PBS can do the series compared to what they do with the first-time book with the first-time books. In the first-time books, they go right to a T almost. And that is the biggest difference in comparison to all three. The fact that PBS, when it comes to a first-time book series, will actually do them right to a T, but when it comes to the big chapter book series, they'll loosely adapt them, but they won't directly adapt them. And that is the biggest comparison.